Indiana Jones and the Great Circle is a first/third-person, whip-cracking, globe-trotting action-adventure escapade, strapping us into the shoes and, of course, hat of the iconic fedora'd archeologist. Coming to us from the Wolfenstein reboot developers, Machine Games, they've delivered perhaps the most faithful game adaptation of the franchise we've ever seen, for better and, at times, perhaps for worse. I'm not going to bury the lead. Indiana Jones and the Great Circle is a fantastic Indiana Jones adventure, ranking up there with some of the best indie films. The plot is the kind of suitably absurd, pulpy MacGuffin hunting fare that has made the movies such classics. With Jones being drawn into his next adventure after one of his recent archaeological finds is stolen from Marshall College by a very ominous gentleman. I won't go too much into the specifics, but it truly hits all the beats you want it to. There's a grand global conspiracy that goes all the way to the very top of the Vatican. There's mythical artifacts buried under some of the world's most fascinating archaeological sites, which are placed in such a way where if you draw a line between them all, you get a great circle around the globe, hence the title. Also, the Great Circle is actually a real thing. Well, it's a real theory some people have anyway. But it's the exact kind of grain of real-life pseudoscience that makes for a perfect bit of juicy Indiana Jones plot fodder. Of course, you're not the only one hunting for those artifacts, with the aforementioned ominous gentleman Locus on the case. As well as one of my new all-time favourite video game villains, the Nazi archaeologist Emmerich Voss. Truly, Voss is such a wonderfully sinister and deranged character, with that perfect little bit of campiness and obscene lust for power that makes for all the best unpredictable Nazi villains.
You should know by now, Indiana Jones, I am always in control.
It confidently hits every other classic indie beat too. There's wisecracks.
Is that the best you got?
There's snakes. There's a temple full of traps.
You're a real lifesaver, pal.
And of course, just a hint of romance.
We all have our weaknesses.
The adventure does feel at times a little bit like it's retreading some of the beats from Raiders the Lost Ark. And it quite literally does in the intro. But it manages to stand as its own story, and it's one any fan is going to eat up. The voice work and performance capture of the cast are excellent across the board too. Troy Baker makes for a near faultless Indiana Jones,
I've had a run-in with the Nazis before, and trust me, it ain't a walk in the park.
while Alessandra Mastronardi plays the smart yet sultry companion Gina to a T. And of course, I've already raved about Marios Gavrilis as Voss. He honestly deserves an award for his performance.
Ihren peinlichen Versuch, Dominanz zu zeigen, zu unterstreichen.
The writing and virtual camera work is all excellent too, with some genuinely funny and heartfelt dialogue, beautiful character models, and eye-catching bits of detail, making the cutscenes an absolute treat to sit back and watch. I mean, look at the way the sweat beads down his face and spit sticks to his lips. Very impressive. And a bit gross.
Afrika.
But of course, we are talking about a game here, not a movie. And when it comes to what you'll be doing during the adventure, it's a mix of puzzle solving, exploration, temple diving, stealth, fisticuffs, whip cracking, and just a smidge of shooting that feels apt for the character. With a few big action set pieces thrown in there for good measure, like some big chase scenes that no Indiana Jones experience would be complete without. Although, for me, while all those elements were enjoyable enough, none of them blew me away. And some of them even felt kinda comical, and not in a way I think was intended. The adventure is broken up into several chapters, each taking place in a certain part of the world. From the halls of Marshall College, the streets of Vatican City, the dig sites of Giza, frozen mountaintops of the Himalayas, and beyond. Some of these areas are more linear levels, while others offer up larger open areas that can be freely meandered through, and one even has a boat you can putter around in. Linear levels, as you'd expect, are a matter of getting from point A to B, solving the odd puzzle, snooping around, gathering information, and dealing with any baddies in your way. When it comes to dealing with said baddies, you can stealth through most of the game if you want, either by avoiding patrols or causing distractions to clear a path. Or, of course, just giving them a good old bonk on the head with whatever you find lying around to take them out of commission. The stealth mechanics are very forgiving, often to the point of absurdity. You could be crouching down barely 5 meters away from a guard in plain sight and he'll just shrug it off. You can dash right through camps and barely raise an eyebrow. You can bonk a guard on the head right next to his mate and he may or may not even notice. It's often pretty silly in action, but I'll take a silly and forgiving stealth system over a harsh and overly punishing one any day of the week. It's mostly not a big deal if you get spotted either, since Indy never minds a bit of a scrap. You have got a hell of a right hook that can see you punch your way through an entire army camp. It's a simple but effective melee system, letting you dish out a quick combo or block punches, which doubles as a parry move if well timed. You can also wind up a powerful punch or do a little dodge. Punches often land with a nice thwack, and there does feel like there's some weight behind it all. You'll need to manage your stamina too, so if you alert too many guards at once, you'll likely be overwhelmed. Not to mention the combat system doesn't really hold up when there's more than a couple of guards trying to punch you at once. As mentioned before, Indy is nothing if not a keen improviser, and there's a giddy assortment of objects around the world that you can pick up and use as temporary weapons. I made it my personal mission to try and use every single piece I could find. There aren't many games where a fly swatter could be considered a weapon, but here, oh, they've got you covered. Indy's trusty whip comes into play, of course, letting you satisfyingly crack a soldier's hands, forcing them to drop their weapon, or wrap them up and bring them in close for a couple of knuckle sandwiches. The whip also comes in handy getting around areas, letting you mantle up certain spots or swing over gaps. You can pick up guns too, but only ever get to fire whatever ammo it currently has in its clip. You keep a revolver on you at all times, should you need it, but honestly, the way it's designed tells you pretty much all you need to know about the shooting in this game. Firstly, revolver ammo is relatively rare to come by in the world, and you hold only a handful of bullets at a time. Not to mention, I think it has the slowest reload animation of all time. It's so slow that it made me basically never use it. I reloaded maybe 3 times throughout the whole adventure. Making things even more hilarious is that direct headshots seem to just get shrugged off. And not just with your revolver either. You can brain a Nazi with a direct hit from a rifle and he'll keep running at you like it was nothing. What are they feeding these guys? Indy can barely take a bullet himself, and firing a gun triggers all nearby guards to make a beeline for you. So, if you engage in shooting anywhere out in the open, you'll crumble faster than a precarious wooden bridge. This was all on normal difficulty too, mind you. So to say they don't encourage shooting is a bit of an understatement. And look, you know what? While on the one hand, it kind of feels bad in action, I do think it's at least fair and faithful to the character. There was this one bit where I went on a bit of a rampage, picking up guns left and right, clearing house in a Nazi camp. And after it had all died down, I felt legitimately weird. Like Indy was looking down at his hands and wondering, when did he become such a monster? But then I remembered they were Nazis, so I got over that pretty quickly. While you can definitely indulge in a bit of pew-pew action here and there, this is clearly designed as a stealth and fisticuffs first sort of situation. It's probably best to leave all that shooting to Nathan Drake anyway. Indy is a man of science after all, so he prefers to use his brains to his brawn. And this adventure is at its best when you're in one of the many temples and ruins, warding off scorpion hordes, using your whip to climb and leap over gaps, taking in long-lost sites, and dealing with some overly engineered puzzles that must have taken these people ages to build. I did love any moment some giant trap activated and the pressure was on. Nothing says Indiana Jones like a giant wall of spikes closing in on you. The puzzles themselves are a bit of a mixed bag. Some had me scratching my head for a minute, but most felt like they had pretty screamingly obvious solutions, or just required a little trial and error to figure out. You do have a camera that lets you take photos of them too to give you hints, and eventually just spell out the solution if you get really stuck. And look, I'll confess, I did end up using this feature on 2 puzzles, but in my defense, I had figured out most of the solution, but was just missing one little thing. And also feeling super lazy and over it at that point, so I just appreciated having the option there and not needing to go look up a guide. You'll be doing a fair bit of exploring, especially in the more open areas. Here you'll have a main quest to follow, but you can nose around and find side missions called fieldwork, which tend to be quite fleshed out bits of side stories with unique characters and cutscenes that are well worth doing. You'll also stumble into little mysteries and obligatory collectathon side quests. And I like that you can revisit any area anytime too, so if you want to just push on with the story, you can, without fear of being railroaded and missing out on some collectibles or side story you just couldn't find or be bothered doing at the time. I liked how you'll find various disguises in these areas that make exploring them a lot easier. There's 2 levels of disguises, one that makes you just a bit less sus to guards, like a cleric robe for example, and one that is just a guard uniform, letting you more or less freely explore the entire area unharassed. It makes it so once you've spent a bit of time in an area, you're freed from needing to stealth around and you can poke your little nose wherever you like. It's definitely worth exploring too, as you'll find new missions and activities like an underground boxing ring, as well as many little points of interest you can snap a photo of to learn something about, as well as notes and bits of information you can add to your journal, which also acts as a very handy real-time map. You'll find bandages to heal yourself with, and bits of food you can scoff for a health or stamina boost. Although, outside of using them to help me get through some boxing matches, I basically forgot they existed. But most importantly perhaps, are these skill books you'll find. These let you buff Indiana's stats, like giving him more health and stronger punches, or even some new special skills. Completing missions and finding all those little notes and points of interest rewards you with adventure points that you then need to spend on unlocking these books. I did find the whole "you got adventure points" thing felt a bit gamey and not super grounded, but it is a game, so I can forgive that. And I did like that it rewards you for exploring each area thoroughly. It's quite a pretty game for the most part, the cutscenes especially, but during gameplay too. It has some beautiful moments, and it ran like butter on my PC. The only gripe I had with the visuals was some noticeable pop-in going on occasionally, especially while putting around on the boat area. And there's a low frame rate on some of the effects that made them look jittery to me, but they're minor nitpicks. Overall, Indiana Jones and the Great Circle delivered what I want out of an indie adventure. It does make you feel like you're stepping into his shoes, with some breezy slapstick stealth action, plenty of ancient temples to explore, and an engaging mystery driving its story that's confidently carried by an excellent cast of memorable characters. Play.
I don't suppose you know how to fly this thing, do you?
Excuse me?
Nothing. Just might have a little trouble with the landing, that's all.